All right, let's dive into one of the shortest, but man, one of the most intense books you'll find in ancient scripture, the book of Zephaniah. It is a message of absolutely devastating judgment, but if you look closer, you'll find this surprisingly elegant structure and, honestly, an ending you would just never see coming.
I mean, the book opens with one of the most terrifying passages imaginable. It doesn't ease you in, it just drops you right into this declaration of total cosmic destruction. The prophet is not pulling any punches here. He's basically announcing that God is about to hit the reset button on creation itself. And that, right there, raises a massive question. How on earth could a prophet, speaking for the God of creation, announce its complete and total undoing? I mean, what could possibly have happened to provoke a message this extreme, this final? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack.
To really get what's going on, we first need to wrap our heads around the central theme that's driving this entire book. It's a concept known as the Day of the Lord.
Now, the people of Judah, they thought the Day of the Lord sounded great. They imagined it as a day when God would finally show up and smash all their enemies. But prophets like Amos and especially Zephaniah came along and completely flipped that idea on its head. They said, oh, that day is coming all right, but the shocking twist? You, God's own people, have become the enemy who's about to be judged. And listen to the specific language Zephaniah uses to describe this judgment. Sweeping away man and beast, then birds and fish. If that sounds familiar, it should. It's a direct, step-by-step reversal of the creation order from Genesis chapter 1. So he's not just talking about losing a war. This is a decreation event, sending the world spiraling back into that pre-creation chaos. Now, this prophecy didn't just happen in a vacuum. To really feel the urgency in Zephaniah's voice, you have to understand the terrifying geopolitical crisis that was unfolding all around the tiny kingdom of Judah. So for years, the big bad on the block was the brutal Assyrian Empire. But then, things start to change, and they change fast. In 626 BC, Babylon breaks away from a fading Assyria. Just a few years later, boom, they sack Assyria's capital, Nineveh. But the real tipping point comes in 605 BC at the Battle of Carchemish. After that, Babylon is the undisputed global superpower, and they immediately turn their sights south, right towards Judah. This looming invasion is the historical Day of the Lord that Zephaniah is screaming about. So right in the middle of this international powder keg, two figures step onto the stage, the prophet Zephaniah and Judah's last good king, a young guy named Josiah. And their relationship, it's absolutely key to this whole story. We know for sure Zephaniah was active during Josiah's reign, but what's really fascinating is his family tree. Most prophets just list their father, right? But Zephaniah's genealogy goes back 4 generations to a man named Hezekiah. And yeah, it's very likely the famous King Hezekiah. This royal connection is a huge deal. It meant that when Zephaniah spoke, the palace had no choice but to listen. And the impact of his message is just undeniable. You can draw a straight line from what Zephaniah condemned to what Josiah fixed. Zephaniah calls out the worship of Baal, the worship of the stars, even the horrific practice of child sacrifice. And what does King Josiah do? He launches reforms that target those exact things, purging the high places and tearing down pagan idols. The evidence is pretty clear. Zephaniah's preaching lit the fire for one of the greatest religious revivals in Judah's entire history. But here's where it gets really, really cool. Zephaniah wasn't just a powerful preacher. He was a brilliant literary artist. His message isn't just a random collection of angry warnings. Nope. It is a masterfully crafted piece of literature with this powerful hidden structure. He uses a device that scholars call a chiastic structure. The easiest way to think about it is like a literary arch or a pyramid. You present a series of ideas, let's call them A, B, and C, and then you repeat them, but in reverse order, C, B, A. And the whole point of building this structure is to force all of your attention onto the single, most important idea that you place right at the center, at the peak of the arch. So here's how Zephaniah builds the first half of his arch. He starts with judgment on the wicked people inside Judah. Then he zooms in, focusing on the corrupt leaders and officials. And finally, the scope just explodes outward to announce judgment on the entire earth. It's this expanding wave of destruction, getting bigger and bigger. And right here, at the very peak of the arch, the dead center of the whole book, the message completely pivots. After all those terrifying warnings of doom, Zephaniah offers this tiny sliver of hope. It's a desperate plea to seek God, with the possibility, and notice, just the possibility, that you might be spared. This is the heart of his entire message.
And from that central point, the structure perfectly mirrors the first half, just in reverse. After the appeal, he announces judgment on the surrounding nations, which mirrors the earlier judgment on the entire earth. Then the focus comes back to Jerusalem's corrupt leaders, mirroring the earlier focus on Judah's leaders. And finally, the book lands on the restoration for a remnant of Judah, bringing the entire structure to this really satisfying and, amazingly, hopeful conclusion.
And that final section, wow, it is truly stunning. I mean, after starting with a message of complete cosmic wipeout, the book ends with a vision of universal restoration. It's an incredible turnaround. So here's the grand design, the bookends of the whole message. It begins with an undoing of the creation story from Genesis 1, where everything is swept away into chaos. But it concludes with a reversal of the curse from the Tower of Babel story in Genesis 11, where humanity was scattered by confused languages.
And just listen to this breathtaking final promise. The ultimate hope isn't just for a small group in Judah. No, it's a vision where God actually reverses the confusion of Babel. He purifies the languages of all nations so that everyone from everywhere can be brought together to worship him. I mean, what a radical, unbelievable vision of hope.
Which leaves us with this one last incredible thought. How is it possible? How does a book that kicks off with one of the most devastating messages of judgment in all of Scripture become the very foundation for one of its most expansive, most inclusive visions of hope for all humanity? That amazing paradox? Well, that's the enduring power of Zephaniah's message.